What's up guys, I'm Pied Piper 33. Welcome to Destiny Gun Master. This is a series where we analyze legendary and exotic weapons in Destiny to decide on what works and what doesn't. Now this is a viewer driven series, so be sure to leave your choice for next week's weapon in the comments below. Today's weapon is the SUROS Regime. Now we're reviewing this as a response to last week for a request to compare the regime to the NL Shadow 71X in terms of which to use. First of all, let's get the basics of the regime out of the way. Now the regime is an exotic auto rifle with two main bonuses, which are focused fire and SUROS Regime. Now the former is the reason for this review and the comparison to the Shadow. Being an auto rifle, the weapon is best suited to be used from close to medium range, truly excelling at the medium range. It has a high rate of fire when not aiming down sights, and has a fairly generous magazine size of 33 rounds. Now the higher rate of fire allows for the gun to get out a fair amount of damage when firing from the hip, but I find aiming down sights tends to yield better effectiveness. Now the focused fire perk slows the fire rate for the gun, but it also increases its damage. Now it's using this perk that the regime fires around the same rate as the Shadow. Now like the Shadow, I find that using this weapon at longer ranges seems to be more effective than firing it for closer ranges, especially with how rampant shotguns are in the Crucible currently. That being the case, the regime should be paired with a special weapon that suits your environment. For example, on bigger levels that have sniping spots, run a sniper rifle with the regime. For smaller levels, run a shotgun or a fusion rifle for the closer combat situations. Alright, now like all the weapons in this series, let's go ahead and go check out the recoil patterns. Now as you can see, for the regime, hip fire for the regime generally goes straight up, but it's still quite bouncy, while aiming down sights tends to go slightly up and to the right, but with significantly easier recoil management. The shots here are shown without any actual attempt to manage recoil. Now as far as the recoil is concerned, again, I would aim down sights with this weapon as it is significantly easier to land the shot where you want it, and the kickback is extremely small. As it's already full auto, you can simply hold down the trigger and focus on your recoil management. I would not fire this gun at the hip unless you have to, as it's unreliable at best for attempting to hit anything farther away than a meter or two. Now for perks, I tend to run the same theme for both PvE and PvP. For the first slot we have Field Choke, Linear Compensator, and Smart Drift Control. Here I choose the Linear Compensator as it makes the recoil pattern a bit more predictable and helps with the stability. Now for the second slot we get Focused Fire, which is where the gun begins to fire a little bit more slowly, but is adding a little bit of damage. Again, this is a good perk to the weapon as it makes landing critical shots easier and more consistent. For the third slot we have High Caliber Rounds, Hammer Forged, and Lightweight. Now I like to take Hammer Forged here as it avoids the extremely high penalty to the gun's range when taking the other two, effectively shortening the damage drop off for shots fired just as significantly. Now in order to maximize on the medium range effectiveness, I like to leave the range as high as I can. The fourth slot is for the SUROS Regime perk, which increases the bottom half of the magazine's damage and allows for health to return upon damaging enemies. Now for a comparison on the rate of fire between the regime and the Shadow, I've included both rates of fire side by side so you can see which one will work better. Now as you can see, they both tend to fire roughly about the same rate, but in my time using both guns, the regime is again significantly easier to manage the recoil. That being said, however, the Shadow actually allows you to keep the range, damage, and also lets you use an exotic weapon in a different slot. Now as far as using each gun, I have more success with using the regime overall due to the extra perks that are on the gun and the easier recoil management. However, I do tend to find myself wanting a gun that's just as effective and being able to use an exotic in a different slot like running Icebreaker or Gjallarhorn. Overall, while the SUROS Regime is a good weapon, I'd rather be using a different exotic, leaving the Shadow as my main weapon of choice out of the two. Now we'll have to see how that pans out in the long run with patch 2.0 on the horizon, where auto rifles are going to be getting a buff again. And with the year 2 version coming back in black, I'll be picking that up as soon as possible when the Taken King hits next month. Well guys, that's my review of the SUROS Regime. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the weapon. Do you think that patch 2.0 can restore this gun to its former glory from the beginning of year 1? Or would you rather just use a different exotic in the primary slot like Thorn, Last Word, or Hawkmoon? Be sure to also leave a comment with your suggestion for next week's Gunmaster down below as well. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a rating and subscribe if you haven't. Make sure you always pay the piper, and we'll see you in the next one.